So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio.
Oh boy, who is looking forward to that 3-day weekend? Can you believe we're already coming up on Labor Day? I feel as if Memorial Day barely happened a few weeks ago. It's amazing how time has been flying by in the midst of this quarantine and everything we've been experiencing. I hope you're doing well and enjoying that time off. I know many of you are working from home. And with working from home, that comes with forgetting to take breaks, task saturation, among other things. In fact, I have a story for you that I'm going to be diving into in a second. And it really asks the question, how far does multitasking go? At what point do we just become lab rats? And I really do mean this because I saw a video the other day and there were so many thoughts going through my head, and I can't wait to share it with you. You're listening to Trending with Timmery, and it's our marriage hour here on Thursdays. Joining me in just a little bit is Cristina Pineda from Matchmakers in the City. She's a regular guest here on Trending, and we're going to be talking about your questions surrounding dating and marriage. So if you have a question for Cristina Pineda, our resident matchmaker, go ahead and give us a call at 1-888-914-9149, or head over to my Instagram story. We've had a question box up there, and we've been taking your questions all day about marriage and dating, and so I can't wait to unpack these. You can go to my Instagram story at Timmery, that's Timmerie, and leave your question for us during the show. If we don't get to it today, we will take a look at it in the weeks to come as Cristina continues to join us here on Trending. One of the topics we're going to discuss is how to avoid cheating and adultery. We live in a culture that doesn't necessarily encourage fidelity within not just a marriage, but even a dating relationship. At the same time, sometimes feelings are stirred toward another person. What do you do when that happens? Is it different if you're married versus dating? We'll unpack those questions for you here on Trending with Timmery in just a little bit. I mentioned earlier, when does multitasking become a detriment? Specifically for the family, for the marriage, but also for you. When do you just become totally inundated with trying to do too much at once? Well, we're going to talk about that. I saw a video the other day posted on LinkedIn by a man of the name Hugo Dennett. And the video is just a video he posted of him working from home, talking about how he loves working from home and some of the challenges that the quarantine has provided with two parents working from home and having a baby at home as well. And so he was commenting on this, and he said it's hard to juggle between work and raising our child in a healthy environment. So sometimes I have to multitask. And then he put little check marks next to these three things. Getting work done, check. Walking toward my 6-mile-a-day goal, check. Letting mommy take a well-deserved nap, check. Then he posts this video. Now, there are two takes I have on this, but much more to unpack. He literally posts a video of himself at a standing desk. But seriously, this standing desk has some upgrades because it is not just a standing desk, it is a walking desk. He's hooked up his treadmill so that it's underneath the desk, and he can walk at the same time as working. Talk about multitasking, but it doesn't stop there. And I have to tell you, this is kind of cool. At the same time, though, I don't know if I could type and work. I don't know. It's just a little much for me. And I know I personally would rather get outside and walk for 5 minutes than walk for half an hour at the same time as working. But it doesn't stop there. This guy has his baby attached to him, holding him in a front carrier as he types and clicks away on his computer, does his treadmill walk of hitting his 6-mile-a-day goal, and works at the same time. Okay, does this remind you of anything? I teased it earlier. A lab rat. A lab rat. You are literally a lab rat, and a experiment is being done on you and you don't even know it. You're literally just hopping in that wheel and you're running and you're running You become a cog in a machine. Now, there's an upside to this story. There really is. My compliments in many ways to this gentleman who's making quarantine, new child, working from home, letting his wife rest, trying to get it all done. And I'll talk about the upside in a moment. But my big question is, at what point are we sacrificing ourselves? And we'll unpack that in just a moment. You see, I see a man here who's a dad taking charge. He's providing, helping to care for his child, and staying healthy. I think these are all great things. But at the same time, we often see this too much so, especially from wives, who are feeling the pressure to have it all and to do it all. To have that mommy-child time of bonding, to get all of the housework done, to make that perfect meal, to stay in the perfect shape, to continue to keep that perfect job with a perfect education, and perform really well at what you do while staying competitive and relevant. Does that sound impossible? Because I do think it is. And there's a reason we've seen this overall decline in female happiness. So again, you can look at this in two ways. Super dad getting the job done and being with baby, although we could dispute how much quality time he's getting. And then on the other side, you could say he's just a lab rat who an experiment's being done on him, and he's just showing the world because not only is he walking his 6 miles, carrying his child, and working at the same time, but he also managed to get a video of it. I mean, come on. How hooked up to a machine can we be? We're at this point in our culture where there's a crisis. And it's a crisis of being productive versus being you. I often present this to young women, whether they're young working women or maybe they're in that transition of college and they're trying to look at what are they going to do, but they're forgetting to ask the question, who am I? It's a question each and every single one of us should ask ourselves, whether male or female. At what point am I sacrificing myself for the sake of productivity? At what point am I just becoming a cog in a machine? Now, I get it. There have been a lot of challenges with this quarantine. This past week, I've been through a whole move, and I'm so grateful for the additional space and the working space, especially because during the quarantine, we launched a daily radio show. That means that Relevant Radio took over my home and how we operate and the space that we have for a whole radio studio. Now, my husband started working from home right around the same time. Needless to say, we were a little cramped. And sometimes it became difficult to have quality time with each other because the new workload and the new space, it was easy to step on each other's toes and to just need that space to get things done. And so it made me ask a question. How do we remain present to ourselves, to others, and to God without sacrificing who we are under the cog in the machine that we are all operating under? Now, there are 3 things that I think that we can look into. And I think this is something we have to write down. Number 1 is, are we being intentional with our quality time? Now, when I say quality time, I'm talking about quality time with others, our loved ones within our home. I'm talking about the quality time that we spend with God. Are we even able to be present in prayer and have quality prayer time? And third, are we present enough even within our own bodies? Are we so distracted by trying to get so many things done and check off that list that we don't even notice we're exhausted, that we're tired, or let's be real, that you even have to go to the bathroom? Honestly, that's the point we're at. We're unaware of our bodily experiences. There are people who are literally wearing Depends and diapers because they're so distracted by the work they're doing. They've lost control of the basic functions of their bodies. And I'm not just talking about video gamers. And you might say, hey, you're giving video gamers a bad rap. But there are tons of people who are having continence issues because of the lack of connectedness we have to our bodies. And I have to tell you, this is true. I've worked in the fitness world for a number of years, and ongoingly it becomes a problem that muscles are deteriorating in a person's body. Our bodies are not functioning as they're created to be because we're not getting enough movement, because we're not getting fresh air or seeing the sun, seeing the beautiful outdoors. In fact, if we look to even various cultures, such as in Africa, there have been studies done that people in Africa see more colors and in deeper vibrance than we can in Western civilization as Americans. They have a larger color spectrum that they perceive because they perceive it more often than we do because we're so inundated by our technology. So the first, intentional quality time, being present in your body with others and with God. Second is to be purposeful with your primary responsibilities. This is where we do talk about having that time dedicated calendar where it's laid out. And this is where we have to ask, what truly rests on my shoulders and what can I ignore? Even maybe some of those emails. Perhaps some of the communication with certain people at a certain point. Perhaps you can only handle so many friendships, so many TV shows. What are your responsibilities and how does that make you purposeful throughout your day, week, or month? And third, what are your monthly goals? So I love to have this goal sheet that I look at every 3 to 4 weeks. I have a reminder, I open it up, and it has my short and long-term goals. And I work to see if I'm meeting them. And they could be personal goals for bad habits, spiritual goals, working maybe on my emotions and certain things I experience. They might be physical goals, just getting enough exercise in. And then I have to ask the question, at the same time as I have all of these goals, am I sacrificing who I am to get these things done? Am I sacrificing my responsibilities? Or are they helping me to become a better person? What do I need to change? And then you might have long-term goals. Maybe you want to buy a house, but you're short-sighted and you're an impulse buyer and you need to work on some good habits. Maybe you want to start a family and you're struggling with fertility, but you recognize that you're so busy you can't even think about it. It's another, no honey, no honey. Well, how are you going to start a family when you're so tired because the cog in the machine is you and you have no time to step outside of the machine? Or maybe you just want to take a vacation and you haven't really planned to make it happen and you're feeling frustrated because everyone else is doing a fun staycation during the quarantine, but you still haven't taken one. You're listening to Trending with Timmery. You're joining us during our marriage hour. Who you are matters above what you do. Because if we're truly rooted in who we are, it will transform everything we do. My guest today is Cristina Pineda. Now, Cristina Pineda is the founder of Matchmakers in the city, the co-founder with her sister, and she is our resident matchmaker here on Trending. And we wanted to talk today about the topic of how to avoid cheating and adultery. This is something that's not often discussed, and I'm sorry to say, it's not really supported in our culture. What's the big deal? You found someone else. You're in love. Love expires. There's a date. Do you know that you can even enter into some marriages in various areas where you actually have an expiration to your marriage? Did you know about that? It's unbelievable. And who does that? Is it really love if it expires? Now, we've been talking about the story of Brian Austin Green and his wife, hint, hint, Megan Fox. Now, if you didn't know, we've been discussing this. It looks like things are coming apart, unfortunately. And there might be something to do with Machine Gun Kelly and a relationship that's blossomed while acting side by side. But what's fascinated me has been Brian Austin Green, that's Megan Fox's husband's, comments on their relationship. Listen to this.
Do you think you and Megan will work things out? I never say never. You never know. I kind of feel like people are on paths in life, and sometimes your paths are together and you travel that path together and you see eye to eye, and then sometimes paths do different things. We had an amazing 15-year relationship. We have 3 beautiful kids. We shared a lot together, and we really went through a lot together. So right now the paths are they're different. She is on her path doing what she feels she needs to be doing to be happy.
This is Brian Austin Green talking about his marriage with Megan Fox. And he's seen her seeking to do her own thing. She's talked about how she's felt free and more herself than ever before, and she discovered this while she was on a trip. But at the same time, Brian Austin Green is saying he's not ruling out reconciling with Megan Fox. Cristina, what's your take on this story?
Hi, Timmerie. So good to be with you. Yeah, I was really humbled by his words, actually, because a lot of times we think about if someone cheats on me, that's it. And it's just the worst possible thing that anyone could ever do. And of course, it is a terrible, terrible thing, but he's coming at it in such a humble way. And in also a very public way, which it makes it even more difficult to when he and his wife are so much in the public eye. But I like to tell our bachelors and bachelorettes that infidelity is common in celebrity relationships. We see it all the time, but no one is immune from temptation. And especially when you reach a certain level of success, like Megan Fox and her husband, temptation surges. You have people reaching out to you all the time. For a lot of times for men, they may get Instagram people sliding into the DMs, all of that. But this creates this idea in our minds that we're above the Lord's law, and that, it's just, I'm special, I'm more special in some way. And we're all wonderfully special. That's true. But none of us is above the Lord's law. And that's why it is harder, even harder for celebrities. It is hard for everyone. And you actually look at the example in the Bible of King David and Bathsheba, and he had a great relationship with the Lord. He was a prayerful man. He was a man after God's own heart. But he does fall to the sin of temptation when he thinks that he is not bound by the law of the commandments.
Right.
And so that's something for us all to keep in mind as we may not be a celebrity, but we're all going to face temptations one way or another.
Cristina, I keep thinking about this. And if you're just joining us, that's Cristina Pineda. She's a matchmaker with her company, Matchmakers in the City. She's with us here on Trending with Timmerie today. And we look at couples like Megan Fox and her husband, Brian Austin Green, and so many of those couples who are in the public eye. And so many people think like relationship goals and, perfect photos. But in reality, they are struggling in their own marriages. And like you said, there's a lot of pressure being in the public eye. But for the majority of us, there is this struggle still where we need to be proactive in avoiding cheating and adultery. How do we do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. And the best way that we've seen is to establish guardrails. This is a quote from, he's actually a Protestant pastor and speaker with a popular podcast. His name is Andy Stanley. And the concept guardrails means to create space between yourself and the chasm so that you don't fall. So if you think about being on a ship, that there's a rail there so you're not going to fall off into the water. These practical ways of doing this is not spending one-on-one time with a member of the opposite sex, not corresponding with them via calls and texts and social media. There's so many ways of connecting now that, just because it's not a phone call or an in-person rendezvous doesn't mean that it isn't creating the temptation arena. And then if you meet someone, so those are for people who you already know, basically. But then you might be in a circumstance where you do meet someone who you find attractive. And I always tell our members to tell that person within the first 5 minutes that you're either in a relationship, you're married, whatever the case is, especially if you find that person attractive. And I don't mean this as because there are some really sweet guys who say, yeah, girls always tell me the first second that I meet them that that they're in a relationship. And I don't mean to do it in a flippant way, because it could hurt a guy if a woman just says that.
Those are those moments where you're like, so my husband, XYZ, in the middle of the conversation, like somehow you just slide it in real smoothly. You see the little dismay on their face.
Yes. Timmery, that is it. And it's just, you try to make it as smooth as possible. You try to think of something that you could tie back to your husband, but make it organic so that he doesn't feel like he's just being shut down, even though he's just trying to have a conversation with you. So that's really important to keep in mind.
Right. And you know what, Christina, I do have to say something. I do notice that this is where if you don't talk about your spouse, that should usually be a warning sign that maybe there's not enough time spent together. There's not enough interest in knowing what your spouse thinks, knowing what your spouse thinks. You know, your spouse should come up in conversation naturally, and people should know you're married. You know, people you work with should know the name of your spouse, that your spouse exists, you know, some of the things you're doing together, because one, sets a good example, but it also reminds you, hey, am I in tune enough with my spouse and my relationship as well? And I think that's huge for setting up that guardrail that you're talking about.
Yes, that is so true. And that actually brings up, for me, my husband and I are speaking of, if my husband's listening, he'll be happy that I'm bringing him up. We're watching Hamilton right now on Disney Plus. And one of the songs is called... Oh, yes, I know. Most people are. And
I haven't yet.
Okay, well, you have something to look forward to. But one of his problems was that he didn't really spend much time with his wife and his family, like you're saying. And one of the songs in it is called Satisfied. And it's about how Alexander Hamilton and his sister-in-law have this attraction to each other. I don't want to spoil anything, but I don't think I'm going to. This is just a side plot. And she keeps singing. She's the one... Her name is Angelica, I think, and she keeps singing this song, He'll Never Be Satisfied, with her and about her sister, because Angelica feels like she's more the dynamic sister. But that brings up the point that the truth is, he would never be satisfied with anyone, because the Lord is the only one who satisfies us. And if we keep searching for complete satisfaction in our relationships, we will continue to promote the divorce culture. And you know what St. Augustine famously reveals. He says, this is such a beautiful quote of his. I love this. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. And he's talking about the Lord. This constant just feeling like, I need to find satisfaction somewhere that's I can't get no satisfaction song. All of this stems from this truth that we can't find it unless it's in the Lord. So any single person, whether it's Machine Gun Kelly for Megan, he's never going to be able to satisfy her. Yes, for now he might be the shiny object in front of her, and that soul connection that she thinks that she was lacking in her marriage. But it's going to be something that comes and goes, and unless we stop the fire and stop that continue, putting fuel to the fire, that connection will grow into a California forest fire and will burn up everything. And then after that whole situation, you'll find desolation. So I pray that she sees this, and people can learn. That's one of the benefits of looking at celebrity relationships, because it's on the big screen. We can analyze these things for our own lives, and we don't mean to condemn Megan or condemn people who are dealing with this. We're all human. We all have failures and temptations, but you want to stop that fire before it starts.
That's Cristina Pineda from Matchmakers in the City here on Trending with Timmery. We're coming back taking your questions about marriage, dating, and relationships, and just a little bit more on really proofing your relationship so that cheating and adultery don't become a problem. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmery.
Catholic professionals find purpose and take your career to the next level by experiencing Tepayak Leadership Initiative. TLI is a 5-month experience, which you can access from anywhere in the U.S. Visit tliprogram.org to learn more. Turn your Catholic faith into the driving force in your career through professional development and spiritual growth. Go to tliprogram.org now. Be part of the next generation of Tepayak leaders. tliprogram.org.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Welcome back. If you have a question during the show, we're taking your questions, everything to do with marriage, dating, and relationships. Cristina Pineda from Matchmakers in the City is here with us. Head over to my Instagram story at Timmery, that's Timmerie, or have your voice heard. Call us old-fashioned way at 1-888-914-9149. Christina, a ton of questions have come in. I hope we can get to a majority of them. But I want to start with kicking it off with a question specifically for people who are single and dating, and we'll flip-flop back and forth between marriage and dating questions. From Angel, tips for dating in a pandemic while some are social distancing. What are your thoughts?
Ooh, I know this is a really tricky one. That's why I've been saying a lot of times you feel like if you're single, the only options are online dating or working with a matchmaker because there are virtually no events. I would, I guess, first start with seeing your friends, seeing who are the friends who are actually doing things, and try to do things with them. And then you can, if you want to try online dating, go for it. And if you want to work with a matchmaker, that's what I would recommend, of course, because we get to know everyone and we vet everyone for you so that you don't have to go through the drama of showing up and then the person not showing up, or the person being a serial killer, or
they're wearing a hazmat suit because of the quarantine.
Exactly. So, and we set up the dates. So at a restaurant, we do outdoor social distance dates, but also outdoor restaurant dates. It's all safe, following protocol, and you can develop a connection like that. So those would be my top suggestions.
Okay, we're going to power through these. So a quick follow-up before getting to a marriage question. One person asked on Instagram, are there more single women out there than what I see online? And I'll add to that. And how do you meet them if it's not online or not with a matchmaker?
Yeah. And that is definitely yes, please. There are so many more women. I would recommend the Young Catholic Professional Group. If you have one in your city, if you don't have one, look into starting one. We have an incredible one in Los Angeles, and I know there's one in the OC. I haven't been to any of their events, but it is a powerhouse of fantastic young Catholic professionals. So that would be my first recommendation.
Awesome. And I'll say this, tell people you would like to date. Tell friends, family members, of course, people you trust, but people who know you, because you never know when you put more ears out there, your social network, the people who know you the best could be the best at matchmaking you as well. Okay, a marriage question here. That's Cristina Pineda with us here on Trending with Timmery. Fawn asked on Instagram, what are your thoughts on young marriages? Are they good or bad? And might this be a solution to a lot of the problems we have in our culture with sexuality and marriage?
I love young marriages. I think that it's really hard to find that kind of love at that young age, and especially because people are so career focused and pushed by our culture to pursue everything, their heart's desires and everything. And it's rare, but if you are mature and if you're someone who knows what he or she wants, then I think that's a beautiful way of beginning your life together. But don't put pressure on it. If you feel like, you know what, I want to keep dating this person. I know that we really love each other, but I'm not ready for marriage yet. That's fine. Give it a few years. If it's from the Lord, it will withstand any time and distance. Distance can be a little tricky though.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yes, but I think it's beautiful.
And I'll just make a couple comments here. I love young marriages. I think we're seeing a trend of more young marriages and young families within faith-based communities. And I have to start by saying this. We can't ignore biology and the fact that God created our bodies to be fertile and capable of having children much sooner. Now, I'm not saying, hey, go have a child at 15 years old. Don't quote me and say that because I didn't say it. What I am saying is that there are prime years where our bodies are fit and better equipped to carry children, to keep up that energy. But the problem is we live in a culture of perpetual adolescence. And so I think if we had more of a responsible attitude earlier on, with finances, with responsibilities, without just trying to chase our dreams, but looking at what am I good at? How can I provide an income and work to live, but not live to always work and be that cog in a machine like we were talking about earlier? It really requires a maturity, and that's something we need. And we need more mentors and examples encouraging us to have this sense of responsibility sooner. Even if we are still having fun, the two don't go against each other. They go hand in hand. Another question, Cristina, that we had, and I'm going to plow through this one just really quick. Is it too late ever to get married in the Catholic Church? How late? How old do you have to be? I'm guessing this question, Teresa, has to do with perhaps you're married outside of the church and you're wondering, is it too late for me to come into the church with my marriage? To make sure that it's a sacrament before our Lord and receive the graces. It is never too late. I encourage you to contact your priest and work through the necessary steps in order to make your marriage a sacrament in the church, for it to be blessed by the church and to have those graces that are so important for marriage. Now, if you're not married and you're just wondering, hey, is it too late for me? It is never too late to get married in the Catholic Church. And so I encourage you, it's an incredible sacrament. And I think that it's a great desire to have. And so whether you're perhaps in a tricky situation with a marriage outside of the church, don't hesitate in doing what you need to do, going through those hurdles in order to participate in the incredible sacrament of marriage. Cristina, I want to dive into another question for dating. The question has to do with discernment. Should I stay open to dating and marriage if I'm discerning consecrated religious life?
Ooh, I think you should. It depends, though. If you're at a seminary and you're just supposed to focus on that, it's a different story. I think you haven't made any vows yet. But it's kind of like what I was talking about, Timmery and I were talking about with the whole cheating thing, and I didn't bring this up, but if you're dating someone and then someone from the past pops up back in your life, you want to see if that person, you want to keep things platonic / business oriented. I just want to give a quick story, Timmery, because I didn't actually talk about this in the last segment. And I think this will help with this question, even though it's about religious life and not another person. This bachelorette who I was date coaching had a man who was kind of an exciting flame come back into her life. And she was dating an amazing Catholic man. So she was uncomfortable. I advised her to keep the conversation business oriented and related because they were talking about business things anyway. And then the relationship just petered out and her Catholic man kept pursuing her. So I think these things, whatever is the Lord has as the right thing will continue and be consistent of moving forward. You won't have to artificially cut something off. So I think that's a hard answer to that question. Timmery, do you have an idea that could answer it more quickly than
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'll repeat it. Heathcliff asked on Instagram, should I stay open to dating and marriage if I'm discerning consecrated religious life? I think it's important to recognize that you're discerning, but you discern a person. And I would always argue that you're discerning a particular religious community. And so I hear a lot of people who talk about discerning, but they're not really discerning a particular community and its charisms, because so many of the religious communities can look so radically different. And you may not be feeling called at all to a particular religious community, but are to another. And so I think that that's important, that you're discerning particular communities and feeling them out, that you've actually maybe done a come and see and stayed a few days and spent time, because I think there's a lot of quote unquote discernment going on, but I think it's often used as an excuse, or people aren't taking the actual steps. And again, when you discern marriage, you discern it with a particular person. That's why when someone says, I really feel like I'm called to marriage, I always laugh, because in reality, we should be open, right, to religious life or to marriage, but we should be discerning marriage with a particular person. Because if you're called to marriage, you're called to marry a particular person. So I think that that's where the whole thing becomes more personal. Okay, another question here, Cristina. Maybe you're a parent out there and you're listening, and maybe you have a child who's asked you this question before. This just came up from Lisa on Instagram. How do you know if you should marry someone? This is what her son's been asking her.
Ooh, I think that is what we're talking about with discernment, that you want it to be, when you're discerning marriage with someone, you want it to be someone who you feel is drawing you closer to the Lord. And Ignatian spiritual exercises are really great for this, because if you know anything about Ignatian spirituality, you learn from many ways, whether it's feelings, whether it's prolonged responses that you get from drawing responses, more negative feelings, anxiety. These are all cues to whether this is going to be a good relationship for you or a bad relationship for you. And you want to follow the good spirit, not the bad spirit. So if you're feeling with this person that usually things are going pretty well and you're excited to be around that person, you want to get to know the person more and more, that's a wonderful, wonderful sign. And that can lead to a beautiful marriage. And I say it's good to give the person the 4 seasons. We have a year recommendation before people get engaged here at Matchmakers in the city, to be able to see the person in different seasons of the year, but also seasons of their life through the ups and downs. And then once a year is a really good time frame to say, okay, I do want to get engaged. I do see myself with this person as my future.
That's Cristina Pineda here on Trending with Timmer. I think we lost your connection briefly there, Cristina. But I want to answer that as well. What she's saying is so spot on, especially when she talks about, drawing you closer to the Lord. But I would also say someone who brings out the best in you, that they're not encouraging bad habits, that they're actually challenging you to grow as a person, not just in your career or whatever that might be. But I'll never forget the visual that I think is so helpful, especially for visual individuals, a pyramid. And I remember one time a professor drawing it in a class. He draws a pyramid. He said, this is you on one bottom corner, this is the person you're dating on the other bottom corner. The only way the two of you will grow closer to each other is if you each make your way up the side of the pyramid toward God at the top. You can know each other and enjoy your time together, but you will not truly know each other and grow closer to one another unless your relationship is rooted in God. And this is why Cristina and I talk about how important faith is when it comes to a marriage and a relationship. It's an important reminder, whether you're dating or marriage, that when you bring our Lord into the conversation, it will truly transform your marriage or your dating relationship, even if it's difficult and there are roadblocks and things come up along the way. It's Cristina Pineda here on Trending with Timmery, and I have just a couple more questions I want to hit on here. Cristina, how do you respond if a man isn't from your area and he asks you to plan a date and he's coming to the area to date you?
We just did, Alessandra and I, we have our YouTube channel, Matchmakers in the City. And the last video that we did is called 5 Secrets Women Wish Men Knew. And this, unfortunately, comes up very frequently. And Alessandra gets pretty frustrated in the video. But you want to let him know that, and don't freak out in the beginning because you might get annoyed, but you want to let him know that you'll be happy with anything that he chooses. Sometimes this is coming from a man who just is nervous because he doesn't want to disappoint you. He wants to make sure that you're happy and it's the kind of caliber restaurant that you would want to go to. So we want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Hopefully that is it's not laziness that he's asking you to do this. It's that attitude of, oh, I just want her to be happy. So make sure you tell him you'll be happy with anything that he chooses. And then you can tell him, oh, I'm just running around during the week so much, and it would be such a gift if you just surprise me. I'm open for anything. I'm not picky. That's the best way to handle it. If he's lazy, he will then say probably, oh, okay, whatever, I'm not going to do that. And then you'll know the truth. But hopefully he'll say, oh, great. And then he'll plan something.
Okay, a follow-up question on that. Many people will say, listen, I'm a faithful Catholic. I have a rich spiritual life. How do I show this on my dates without scaring people away?
Yes, this is a challenging one, and it's important.
I'm dying. I'm thinking of we need a spoof here for this on the show.
It's difficult though, and I know as a faithful Catholic woman, that was hard for me. I struggled with that, and a lot of the people who I date coach who are religious and faithful, they do too. But you want to remember what our Lord says of not throwing your pearls to pigs. That little by little, you want to get to know someone and show who you are, rather than bringing up and this is an in-person kind of thing that you want to get to know them. It's not, because I know some people are starting relationships during COVID that are more letter-based and phone calls, but I would definitely save some of this really deep personal religious, if you've had deep religious experiences, for when you've established the relationship, your boyfriend and girlfriend at that point. So it's like peeling the layers of an onion. We like to say you don't want to reveal too much in the beginning. You want a little by little show, and then you'll see how much they can take. And sometimes you might realize in the first few dates that, okay, we're just not equally yoked. This isn't going to work. And you don't have to deal with that feeling of extreme vulnerability that you just gave a person part of your soul.
Amen. Okay, we are almost out of time here. So many questions. If we didn't get to yours, I'm sorry, but here's a good one. I'll try to answer. And Cristina, if you have a follow-up, please let me know. On Instagram, Stella asked, what's the difference between courtship and dating? Am I correct, Cristina, in my understanding that courtship is focused on marriage, whereas in our current culture, dating can kind of just be what we do and it's fun?
Yes, I think that's true. I think I use them interchangeably. Maybe I shouldn't, but I think that for me, for all of our members too, that dating is something that is supposed to lead to marriage. So I consider that courtship. And I think that as long as you have that in mind, call it what you will, but you do want to keep the marriage as your goal.
I'm having to mute myself over here. I'm dying. My producer, when we were asking the question about how do you make sure that you kind of don't be too obvious on the first date about being prayerful, she's like, oh, can you hold my chapel veil for me? Just making sure that person knows. Anyways, that's Cristina Pineda from Matchmakers in the City, joining us regularly. Pray for her. She's got a baby coming next time we speak. There will probably be a new baby. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmery during our marriage hour to talk about why is marriage indissoluble? Why is it permanent? Why are we called to be faithful? We'll be right back.
Timmery will be right back. You can reach her on Instagram and Twitter at Timmery. That's TIMMERIE. Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
Why is marriage indissoluble, unbreakable? Why are we called to be faithful in marriage? Why is marriage permanent? Why is it meant to be fruitful? It's our marriage hour here on Trending with Timmery. We're going to dive into some of these questions in the time we have left together. Listen, if you are not already subscribed to Trending, please head over to relevantradio.com/trending. Do it now. And you're going to subscribe to the podcast. You don't have to miss a single episode of Trending. You can take your favorite episodes or maybe topics that you think would be really helpful for someone and send a link to the show to a friend. You can subscribe on your favorite podcasting app, whether it's a Relevant Radio app, Spotify, Google, Apple, you name it. We are there and would love to be with you on your road, on your jog, wherever you might be. So why is marriage indissoluble? We often talk about how we're called to fidelity in marriage. We've been talking a lot about, really kind of combating that infidelity of our culture, whether you're dating or maybe you're married. So why be faithful? We often speak in the church about how we're called to things that are true, good, and beautiful. This is part of what marriage is. It's good and it's true and it's beautiful in part because it's faithful. It's indissoluble, unbreakable. You see, for something to be good, true, and beautiful, it's fulfilling requirements of a human-centered design. A design that focuses on the whole person, body and soul. Because you see, we as human beings are made for communion. And to emphasize physical fidelity in terms of intimacy emphasizes the physical safety of the body, the health and well-being of the body. The body was created for monogamous relationships. This is the healthiest outcome for the human body. It's also the healthiest emotional outcome in terms of memories that are created within the body, because we're creating emotional and physical connections to people. We're creating chemical cocktails in our brains that bond us to other people. Oxytocin, serotonin, norepinephrine, all of these hormones and chemicals that are releasing within intimacy are forming permanent memories to another human being. But you see, some of these chemicals and things are also released when we look at not quite appropriate images. Those same things can be released, and it damages our human-centered design of monogamy being created for one person. Or when we struggle in chastity outside of marriage, that's harmful for the human-centered communion of persons, husband and wife in marriage. So why is faithfulness upheld? Because it's good for the physical body, it's good for the chemical makeup of the body, but it's good overall for the human person. Because we are made for communion, and our souls are restless, as we hear St. Augustine say, we just celebrated his feast day, until they rest in thee, until they rest in God, right? Our soul's restless until it rests in God, but our soul's also restless when we don't have that fidelity to another human being within marriage. We're restless when we're unfaithful to ourselves and the commitments we make in marriage. This is why marriage is so human-centered when we emphasize that marriage is unbreakable. It's permanent. It's faithful. It's fruitful, because in a communion of persons, there's meant to be fruit that comes from who we are, both physically in children that are created, co-created, should I say, with God, but also spiritually in the fruits that come about by the work of our hands, the influence of our relationships. These are all things that point back to why marriage is created for the human person to be indissoluble. Not just because it's a rule that God made, it's actually for us. It's God's divine accommodation reaching down and saying, this is what's best for you, who I created. I know what is best for you because I created you, and I created you for this purpose. You're listening to Trending with Timmery. This has been our marriage hour, and tomorrow we're going to hear the story of a woman who conceived a child via IVF but would never recommend it to anyone else.